Well, it turns out, Joe, your impression is correct. Remember back in July, President Trump's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, promised there would be a counter report to Robert Mueller's findings when it came out. But now, a half dozen current and former White House officials are telling The Atlantic the administration has no plan in place for responding to the special counsel's findings. Speaking to The Atlantic, Giuliani said it's been difficult in the past few months even to consider drafting response plans or to devote time to the counter report he claimed they were working on this summer as he and Trump confronted Mueller's written questions about the 2016 campaign. Giuliani saying, quote, "Answering those questions was a nightmare. It took Trump about 3 weeks to do what would normally take 2 days."
That's just, you don't want your lawyers saying that.
No, you don't want that. So a former senior White House official who requested anonymity also told The Atlantic attempting a plan would mean, quote, "You would have to have an honest conversation about what might be coming." And while the White House might not be ready, Giuliani says that will not stop President Trump from tweeting about it, of course. Giuliani told The Atlantic that letting Trump guide the response to the Mueller report may not be ideal, but added, "I don't think there's anyone in the world that can stop Donald Trump from tweeting. I've tried," he says.
Well, goodness, a lot of CYA phraseology in there.
What time did he craft that statement?
I don't know, but Willie, isn't that
was it late in the day?
Isn't that fascinating that you could actually look at about 4 or 5 different parts of that statement, and you would see Rudy Giuliani distancing himself from Donald Trump?
Oh,
or
yeah.
It's just late in the day.
And also, I don't want my lawyer saying this should have taken 2 days, but it took that guy 3 weeks. That's not what I want. That's not what I want to hear from my lawyer. I guess, Michael Steele, the answer to the plan is we've been watching it for 1.5 years now, which is that the president has been undermining the investigation. That's the plan. That when it comes out, President Trump can see, I told you, 17 angry Democrats. It's corrupt. It's a witch hunt. Don't believe a word of it.
Well, that's been the goal from the very beginning because of what's laid out in the Atlantic story. There has been no internal operational control over this situation to the extent that they are prepared to respond from the legal perspective. They're prepared to respond politically. The president has taken it unto himself because he is unto himself all things. The idea that he can best message a response to this whenever it happens. And that's why you see a Giuliani and others out there saying, a little backstroke here. Well, this guy 2 weeks, 3 weeks for other people or whatever. The reality of it is Trump controls this, always has, always will, right to the bitter end. And that is the most frustrating part for the people who are actually trying to get this man's feet off the hot coals. And he keeps putting them back in. Today's a big day. We're going to be waiting. I won't be surprised if there's a lot of black print on those pages. Mueller is not going to, even in these sentencing charges to the courts, detail out for the public at this point, certainly for the Trump team, stuff that he plans to drop a little bit later on. He's just not going to do it.
Michael, those black bits on all of the filings, because he is such a sphinx and we don't hear from him, unlike Ken Starr, who kind of gave interviews every time we put the trash out. We don't hear anything.
Redactions, you mean?
Bob Mueller. And so we go through these documents and we think to ourselves, what are we learning from them? But there are so many redactions that so much of it is blacked out. When you look at the documents that are going to come on, the sentencing documents for Manafort and for Cohen as well, how much redaction do you expect there to be? And what if you were Bob Mueller, what would you be putting behind those redactions? What is it you don't want the public to know at this stage?
My guess is we'll continue to see them, because if these folks have been helpful, like Cohen, then you don't want the fruits of that help to be public as you continue to investigate. So I'm always never waiting for Bob Mueller to make our days easier in terms of that. But what he has behind those black marks is whatever will come from this. Is this really, did Cohen really help them? Yeah, did Cohen really help them in ways that are extraordinary about the businesses, about what was really going on with Trump and his money? Or was this just stuff about the payments? And unfortunately, we'll have to look at those black, areas, and in several months or years, we'll get to see behind them. But for now, they need to protect what they're doing going forward.
Michael, it's interesting how the Republicans have responded to Donald Trump's blurring of the lines when it comes to Saudi Arabia and the murder of a Washington Post columnist, a Virginia resident, the father of American children. I think it'll be curious to see after this report comes out and as the Mueller investigation moves down the road, will we see more Republicans backing away from Donald Trump on this matter as they backed away from him on Saudi Arabia? Are we, and we're not at a tipping point, but are we starting to move toward a tipping point?
I'm not convinced of that yet, Joe, because you're talking really two different things. The Saudi Arabia piece is foreign affairs, is international intrigue. It's a name a lot of folks have a hard time pronouncing. In other words, it's not something that's in the day-to-day mind of a lot of the base Republicans out there that the members of Congress would be concerned about. Whereas on the other side of that, with respect to Mueller and other things that are going on, the base is much more connected to those storylines. So they get immediate feedback from that, and the members respond to that. And that's why you'll see them sort of step in more boldly. Lindsey Graham out there showing his anger over the president's response to Khashoggi, but sort of backpedaling on North Carolina. No, or backpedaling on Wisconsin, what's going on there, or backpedaling even on the Mueller investigation, and not really stepping in and saying, Mr. President, we have a problem here. So I think the way they bifurcate this is what the political interest is and where it lies. And where it lies largely is with the base outside of the Khashoggi situation.
Joe, are you seeing any indication in the Republican Party that the 40 seats they lost in the House in the midterms is having some effect? I mean, I was wondering whether the Khashoggi stuff and the way the senators have spoken out on that is in some way related to that. That he's got less of a mind.
I can tell you,
now.
It's a really clarifying moment when you were sitting in the House and you're elected, as I was elected in '94, and you develop close friendships and alliances with certain people who you expect to win, expect to work with for the next 2 years, and then they come back and boom, as we Baptists would say, it's like the rapture. They just boom, disappeared. And I remember after '96 losing some freshmen that came in, and when that happens, it's chilling. And you think, wait a second, I thought there was no way that guy would get beaten. It could be me next. And so I do think it's going to have an impact. Maybe not immediately, but there are I think you're going to see more members deciding very early on to explain to their base why they have to separate themselves from Donald Trump on certain issues where he behaves in an aberrant way, violates constitutional norms. There also, though, is still rank hypocrisy. You brought it up in a tweet last night, Sam Stein.
Oh.
We have Michael Steele talking about North Carolina. Marco Rubio, before the election, after the election, was banging the drums on Democrats stealing votes and voter fraud. No evidence whatsoever about voter fraud in the state of Florida. And yet you approached Marco Rubio and his office and asked what they thought about the clear evidence of Republicans committing voter fraud in North Carolina. What was their response?
It's been well over 24 hours now. I haven't gotten a response. And listen,
but voter fraud was so important to him. What happened over the past month?
I'm happy if they want to just come back to me and say, listen, that's North Carolina. We're the senator from Florida. We want to stay in our own zone. Fine. That can be your statement. I don't care. But he made election integrity like a paramount issue of his concern in the aftermath of what happened in the Florida Senate race, to the point where he was tweeting out at one point a sort of video conspiracy.
But actually nothing happened in the Florida race, which separates the Florida race from the North Carolina race. So if it's about the integrity of the democratic process, shouldn't Marco Rubio come out today and criticize what is clearly election fraud in North Carolina?
That's why I asked. I would think so. Yeah, absolutely.
Michael Schmidt. Let's move from hypocrisy to again the Robert Mueller investigation. When do we expect the documents to come out, and what's next? What's after these documents?
What we'll have to see, and we were sort of mentioning this earlier, is if Mueller does want to subpoena the president, is he allowed to do that? does whoever the acting or attorney general allow him to proceed with that? And that's important in terms of a report, because if Mueller wants to take a major investigative step, like subpoenaing the president or charging someone, and at the top of the Justice Department they say, no, 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 you can't do that, then that triggers a report to Congress. Now, is this a robust Starr-like report? Probably not, but it means that Congress has to be told that Mueller wanted to do something and was not allowed to do that. So it puts the top of the Justice Department, the officials who are going to be political appointees, whether they're the acting attorney general or not, in a bind, because they don't want to be seen, may not want to be seen as impeding that. And that will probably be the biggest next test as it relates to the president.
I still believe it's going to be very hard for any attorney that works in Washington, D.C., or ever wants to work in Washington, D.C. after Donald Trump leaves town to stand in the way of Robert Mueller.
Yeah.
If he wants to get a subpoena and the president's fighting him, to stop him from
Same
going
with anybody in the
stop him from
administration.
going to the United States Supreme Court, who would confirm that Robert Mueller has the right to subpoena the president.
Michael Schmidt, thank you very much. And
Thank
still
you,
a
Mike.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.